just to say, oh, it was so beautiful and it was art. But yeah, not so great there. But also, yeah, that those are the main achievements of the Tang and Song Dynasty here. In conclusion, so Tang and Song Dynasty, the early period was in the whole period of the Tang and Song Dynasty was in China, but now we move to Japan. Japan geography was pretty tough, but it also had its advantages. It had plentiful rainfalls and warm summers, access to the ocean, which helped as a source of protection from invaders, access to trade as a source of food. An archipelago was an obstacle to unification, though that was the problem. It was very mountainous with small amounts of land, only flat enough for farming, so they couldn't make too much food. Approximately 150 volcanoes, half of which are active on the archipelago of islands. And Earth's crust near Japan is very unstable, causing frequent earthquakes and occasional tidal waves and tsunamis. As you can imagine, you remember the tsunami just happened recently, like 10 or so years ago in Japan. That was a pretty big deal. Now, Shintoism, that was the first original religion in Japan. Here's some of the stuff they do. They honor natural phenomena, humans, and innate objects through kami, which are spirits that animate all life. The Shinto consists of rituals for the well-being of the community. It's all about the community. Shrines are home to the kami, and a torii is an archway that separates everyday space for the sacred space where it could pray and meditate. And the big thing about Shintoism is they have some very key and important rituals. The purification of the hands and the mouth, the call for the kami's attention, good luck charms, written petitions, pray for good health, children, and schools. But for purification, they most often use water and fire to kind of purify themselves in some way or another. Now we get to the next part of the Japan religion, and a lot of people did that. And it's Zen Buddhism. It's all about meditation and prayer. It came to Japan from China in the 1100s AD, of course. It emphasized seeking one's Buddha through meditation. It was all about staying in the present, rather than letting the mind wander to thoughts of the past or the future. So, for example, if you were writing something down, you couldn't think, oh, what am I going to have for dinner tonight? You got to think, what are you writing down? What are you going to say next? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can't have your mind wander. You're going to be very focused all the times. And so it's all about monks writing down very key things. And if you remember, we were watching a video on this in class. This may jog your memory because it was a pretty memorable thing that we saw. And it was all about staying so focused that there was a bunch of monks meditating like this, right? And they were all in a crouched down position. And the head monk would come around and crack them on their backs with a big wooden stick to help them stay focused. So that's pretty much where their mind was at. And it was really quite incredible because you were just like, whoa, they are very serious about this. And yes, they were. There is no doubt about that. So another important thing that came through with Japan is selective borrowing. They borrowed the best parts of other cultures such as China, and they borrowed things from China such as their government, arts, and writing systems. So that was something that was pretty critical that allowed them to succeed and to grow. And they implemented that during the Heian period. The Heian period was all about a strong central government with a court and high society that arose. The Tale of Genji also arose during that period. It was the very first novel ever written. It was a classic work of Japanese literature written by the noblewoman Murasaki Shikibu. It was called the world's first novel and was written by a woman, so that's pretty cool. Feminist out there, I guess. I don't know. And the Pillow Book was a book that emerged later on describing life in the emperor's court. So that Heian period of strong central government, emperor, etc., that all kind of disintegrated later on into feudal Japan, where large landowners with their private armies became more powerful. And those private armies were pretty much those private armies were all about the samurai. They were the samurai. Feudalism developed and power shifts away from the emperor and the court to the shogun, the military commander, the dictator who runs the show, and the daimyo, and by extension the samurai. The daimyo were the lords. And here's how the social structure worked. The emperor, he was at the top, but he was largely a puppet. He really had no political power. That led down the shogun, who was the actual ruler, really running things. He ran the show, quote unquote. The daimyo, which are the large landowners, and the samurai were the special class of warriors loyal to the daimyo. Then there's the artisans, peasants, and merchants, who all were kind of equal. The peasants, well, they're peasants, and the merchants were the lowest status, but gradually gained more influence. And the artisans made swords and armor for the samurai class, so they were kind of needed and very important. So samurai class, once again, class of warriors that served the lords, the daimyo, who had all the power in the situation. The code of Bushido was what the samurai had to follow. They were the code of respect that preached loyalty to the daimyo, and the samurai were forced to follow. So it was about being loyal and never letting down your squad, your fam, and your leader, the lord and the daimyo. So, all right, let's go review podcast today. Also, something worth reviewing is reviewing that blank map, of course, and I hope you enjoyed it. Sorry if it was a little rambling. I know it was a little bit longer than my old one, but yeah, hope you enjoyed it, and hope you do well on the test, everyone. Thank you very much for listening.
Today's sales leaders face a difficult task, selling the right products at the right time through the right channels. A new 3-day program from Harvard Business School Executive Education addresses this problem directly. Join us on the Boston campus in August.
All right, we're now going to move on to Global Unit numero 5, and that is Islam. Ladies and gentlemen, we're back. It's now time for another Global Review podcast. The moment has arrived at this time of year. It's that time of unit again, I guess. For the Global Review podcast, this is our third one we've ever done, but it will be on the Unit 5 Islamic world. So what we're going to start by going over is how Islam took place originally in the Middle East. Then we'll talk about the West African kingdoms, then the East African Swahili coast region, and then finally Islam in India. Then we'll take a look at Islam and Sikhism and the best strategies for how to study further, because I know we are doing this podcast pretty darn early. Some of you have the quiz on Friday, Monday, and Tuesday of this upcoming week, I believe. And yeah, so we're going to do it. We did it a day earlier than last time, but again, that is not the point. But we will now continue. Let's get started. So, of course, the Middle East. We start with the Middle East. And right now, how did the religion spread? That's one of the big things. So pretty much what happened is in the Middle East, it spread a lot by conquest. It was significantly aided by the spread of Islam. And the thing was the Byzantine and Persian empires. Those were the empires that were in place as the Islamic Empire was just rising up. They were pretty much on the down end. They were pretty tired from years and years of fighting. There was also a traditional Bedouin religion in place originally, and that religion was very tribal, very there's a small groups, small tribes that go around conducting targeted raids for food, water, because obviously water there in the desert is pretty hard. Then Muhammad comes along, or hard to come by, and so then Muhammad comes along and gets a huge following based on a simple principles that obviously would later be formed the religion of Islam. And I mean, they pretty much gained a lot of strength through missionaries, or people pretty much seeing their work in action. People from the Islamic religion coming over and telling other people about the success of the religion. And pretty much what happened was, if you remember back to the beginning of the unit, it was Muhammad, the Prophet Muhammad, the founder of Islam, was banished from Islam, from his hometown of Mecca originally. He was sent back to Medina, where he gained a small following, practiced and formulated the ways of Islam. Then, as an army of just around 300, came back to reclaim Mecca as its own and turn it into an Islamic religion. And, well, they didn't have a lot of odds because they were going up against the entire army back in Mecca, which was very huge. But they were outnumbered at such a high ratio. They kept fighting, and eventually they won. They took control of the Islamic, the old Bedouin hotspot, where, of course, there was of the Bedouin hotspot of Mecca, where, of course, there was the Kaaba, which is kind of that big black square that so many people make the Hajj or the pilgrimage to in Islam, and it's a big journey. It's a big trip that they have to make. It reunites them, and it brings them all to their beliefs, and people talk. They exchange ideas, and they talk about how things are going in their lives. It's a pilgrimage that once in their lives every Muslim must make, and it was a big deal. As then they kept fighting. They kept trying to reclaim their city, their old city. Muhammad did, and eventually, as they kept fighting, they kept pushing on. They had little bits of success, and then people surrounding it in the other Bedouin tribes around the area, they were shocked. They were like, "How is this dude having any success? He's like a nobody, and he doesn't really have any armies. This must be the hand of God at work pushing him, and there must be something divine about this dude who just come out of nowhere and is suddenly taking down one of the biggest cities in the region." And so they joined him, and by the time Muhammad eventually took back Mecca, he outnumbered the people who are outnumbering him by a huge margin originally. So that was a big deal. Then that Islamic army spread quickly. The Byzantines and the Persians, as I mentioned, they were on the down end. They were pretty tired from years of fighting. The Byzantines were pretty particularly tyrannical and weak in their ruling style, which made the Muslim army feel like liberators. People are like, "Oh my gosh, it's the Muslim army. They're coming to invade us," but that's a good thing because I don't want the rulers that I currently have. The people who were saying that were hymns or Syrians who were just like, "Get me out of this original religion here." Yeah, and a lot of people at this time, religion was used as kind of a way of life. In the Arabic region, Islam was. Prayers were called 5 times a day. Islamic Sharia law was pretty harsh, and Islam was kind of a way of life in Arabic Middle Eastern countries. They follow the 5 pillars, which we'll get to in a minute. And there was a lot of cultural diffusion in the Abbasid Caliphate, which took hold a little bit after kind of everyone was done conquering things. Here, after they kind of took control of the whole region. That kind of happened after everyone was done doing everything kind of settled down. All the fighting, all the claiming of territory by the Islamic Empire, that settled down. And then we had the Abbasid Empire, which really moved toward a lot of scientific achievements, cultural achievements, and a lot of big strides, some of which we still use today. So there's a lot of cultural diffusion because all people from all around the world came to this place in Iraq called Baghdad. It was kind of the centered, that was where all the cultural diffusion was taking place. Scholars worldwide came to study in the House of Wisdom. They drew on past philosophers such as Aristotle and Plato, and all the people pretty much back to the Greek ages, and it was one of the wealthiest, most fabulous cities, rival places like Rome in its kind of opulence and wealth there. They faced a lot of problems they had to work out due to their meteoric rise of the empire, but they did make some pretty outrageously amazing achievements. They formed an Islamic religious calendar. They measured the circumference of the entire earth. They also developed algebra and algebraic formulas. They developed some of the basic math and scientific principles, including stuff like medicine, that we still use today. This was really the only main golden age in the region. The Abbasid golden age was a period of unprecedented growth and prosperity in the region. So there was really no other golden age at any time in real period that we live in at the moment. But that we studied in the current Unit 5. But in the West African kingdoms, the religion spread through conquest to North Africa through the Islamic army that conquered a lot of the Middle Eastern and Arabic regions. They now kind of spread towards the tip of Egypt, past that skinny Red Sea, and spilled out into the area of North Africa. And Islamic armies came strong through the Arabian Peninsula, and then more West African leaders saw their dominance, and soon some people converted. Some of their leaders saw the dominance of the Islamic army and was like, hey, I think I want to become Islam now. And they converted as